Have you ever felt an inexplicable connection to someone you've just met? That strange sensation that your souls have danced together before, in a time beyond memory? Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, believed these moments weren't coincidences but glimpses into the eternal nature of our spiritual connections. He might not know why, but his spirit feels you. This profound statement encapsulates one of Cayce's most transformative insights about the invisible threads that bind souls across time and space. While in his conscious life, Edgar Cayce was a humble man with limited formal education. In his trance states, he accessed what appeared to be universal knowledge about the nature of existence. Among his most compelling revelations were those concerning the spiritual connections that transcend our physical understanding. Connections that operate beyond conscious awareness, yet profoundly influence our lives and relationships. What if everything you feel towards certain people isn't random but purposeful? What if your spirit recognizes others before your mind can comprehend why? In a small, dimly lit room in Virginia Beach in 1931, Edgar Cayce sat across from a researcher who had traveled hundreds of miles seeking answers about human connections that science couldn't explain. The setting was modest. A simple wooden desk, 2 chairs, and the gentle sound of waves breaking in the distance. This conversation, documented but largely overlooked for decades, contains some of Cayce's most revealing insights about the spiritual nature of human relationships. "Mr. Cayce," began the researcher, adjusting his notebook nervously, "I've documented dozens of cases where people describe meeting strangers yet feeling immediate, profound connections, as if they've known them their entire lives. Science offers no satisfactory explanation. What does your unique perspective reveal about this phenomenon?" Cayce smiled gently, his eyes reflecting a wisdom that seemed to extend far beyond his humble appearance. "What you're describing," he said, leaning forward slightly, "is the soul's recognition of its own journey. When two spirits have shared experiences, whether in this life or another, they carry the imprint of that connection in what I call the Akashic records, the soul's memory palace." The researcher's brow furrowed. "Are you suggesting some form of reincarnation? That souls repeatedly encounter one another across different lifetimes?" "It goes deeper than simply meeting again and again," Cayce replied, his voice taking on a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality. "Souls travel in groups, in what might be called soul families or soul clusters. They agree to certain lessons, certain experiences together. The physical mind forgets, but the spirit never forgets. He might not know why, but his spirit feels you." Cayce paused, his fingers lightly tapping the table as if emphasizing an invisible point. "This is why you can meet someone for the first time, yet feel as if you've known them forever. But how does this recognition occur?" the researcher pressed, clearly fascinated. "What's the mechanism?" Cayce closed his eyes momentarily, as if accessing something beyond the room. "The soul communicates through vibration, through energy patterns that exist outside of our physical senses. Every soul has a unique vibrational signature, like a cosmic fingerprint. When souls that have shared significant experiences encounter one another, there's a resonance, a harmonic convergence of energies that the conscious mind experiences as familiarity, attraction, or even discomfort if the previous relationship held unresolved lessons." The researcher scribbled frantically. "And these vibrations, they function regardless of conscious awareness?" "Precisely," Cayce nodded, his expression brightening at the researcher's understanding. "The rational mind may invent reasons for the connection, physical attraction, shared interests, coincidental timing, but these are merely the mind's attempt to make sense of what the soul already knows. Many of our strongest relationships, both positive and challenging, are continuations of spiritual connections that have spanned multiple existences." "You mentioned discomfort," the researcher noted, looking up from his notes. "Not all of these connections are positive, then." Cayce's expression grew more serious. "Soul connections aren't always comfortable, but they're always purposeful. Some souls agree to play challenging roles in each other's journeys, to teach patience, forgiveness, or compassion. What appears as conflict in this life may be the continuation of unresolved lessons, or the balancing of what you might call karmic patterns. He leaned back, his hands folded calmly in his lap. This is why you might feel an inexplicable aversion to someone you've just met, or conversely, why you might feel compelled to help a stranger despite logical reasons not to. How does this understanding change how we should approach our relationships? The researcher asked, a note of personal curiosity entering his professional tone. Cayce smiled knowingly. When you recognize that your connections are not random but meaningful, part of your soul's journey, it transforms your perspective. Every relationship becomes an opportunity for growth, for healing, for the evolution of consciousness. Even the most difficult relationships can be understood as spiritual catalysts. The researcher seemed to hesitate before asking his next question. In your readings, you've mentioned soulmates. Is this the same phenomenon? Ah, Cayce said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. The term soulmate has been greatly misunderstood. It's not merely a romantic ideal. A soulmate is any soul with whom you have a deep, meaningful connection from previous incarnations. This could be a romantic partner, yes, but also a parent, a child, a friend, even someone you consider an adversary. The intensity of the connection is what matters, the depth of the soul contract, if you will. Soul contract? The researcher repeated, his pen hovering above the paper. Yes, Cayce nodded deliberately. Before incarnating, souls make agreements, contracts, if you will, to assist in each other's spiritual development. These agreements outline the roles we'll play in each other's lives, the lessons we'll help each other learn. Some contracts are brief, perhaps a meaningful encounter that changes your direction in life. Others span decades, like a marriage or a parent-child relationship. The researcher looked thoughtful. So when someone feels an immediate, powerful connection, their spirit is recognizing a soul with whom they have a significant contract. Cayce finished for him. The conscious mind may not understand, but at a deeper level, there's a recognition. Ah, there you are. We have work to do together. You mentioned earlier that these connections function through vibration, the researcher said, flipping back through his notes. Can these vibrations be perceived, perhaps measured somehow? Cayce chuckled softly. Your scientific instruments aren't yet sophisticated enough to measure soul vibrations directly, though they may one day evolve to that point. However, we all have an innate ability to sense these vibrations. You might call it intuition or gut feeling. When you meet someone and feel immediately drawn to them or repelled without logical explanation, that's your soul responding to their vibrational signature. Does this explain the phenomenon of thinking about someone moments before they call or appear? The researcher asked, his skepticism seemingly diminishing with each answer. Absolutely, Cayce replied with conviction. Souls that are deeply connected can communicate across space and time. When you think of someone and they call moments later, it's not coincidence. It's soul communication. The stronger the connection, the more pronounced these synchronicities become. The researcher paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. These ideas challenge everything I've been taught about human relationships. If what you're saying is true, it means none of our significant connections are accidental. Now you're beginning to understand, Cayce said, his voice gentle but firm. There are no meaningful coincidences in our connections. Each significant relationship serves the evolution of our souls. Even seemingly chance encounters that profoundly impact your life were, at a spiritual level, orchestrated for your growth. What about people who feel chronically disconnected from others? The researcher asked. Those who struggle to form meaningful relationships? Cayce's expression softened with compassion. Such souls are often working through particularly challenging lessons of independence or self-reliance. Or perhaps they're completing karmic patterns that require a period of solitude for reflection. But no soul is truly alone. Sometimes the most important connection that needs to be strengthened is with their own higher self, their own divine nature. You've mentioned karma several times, the researcher noted. How does this concept relate to soul connections? Karma is simply the spiritual principle of cause and effect, Cayce explained patiently. It's not punishment, but balance. Souls that have created imbalance together in one lifetime often incarnate together again to restore harmony. This is why some relationships feel burdened with unspoken histories or inexplicable dynamics. You're not starting from zero. You're continuing a story that began long ago. The researcher looked up from his notes, a personal question clearly forming. Is it possible to recognize these connections? To know when you're meeting someone from your soul group? The soul always knows, Cayce answered, his gaze intensifying. The question is whether you're listening. Pay attention to your immediate intuitive response when meeting someone new. That immediate feeling, before your mind analyzes or rationalizes, is your soul's recognition. Trust that response. It's speaking a truth your conscious mind may not yet comprehend. But how can we distinguish between simple attraction or compatibility and these deeper soul connections? The researcher pressed. Time reveals the difference, Cayce said simply. Physical attraction or surface compatibility may bring people together, but without a soul connection, the relationship lacks depth and purpose. Soul connections endure, evolve, and transform both parties. They challenge you to grow beyond your limitations. And importantly, he added with emphasis, soul connections often defy logical explanation. They may not make sense to outside observers, or even to your rational mind. The conversation paused as the researcher gathered his thoughts, the scratching of his pen against paper the only sound in the room. Finally, he looked up. You've spoken about romantic connections and challenging relationships, but what about the profound connection between parent and child? Is this also a soul agreement? One of the most sacred soul contracts we make, Cayce affirmed, his voice softening. The parent-child relationship is rarely random. Souls often choose their parents, or agree to be chosen, based on the lessons both will learn through the relationship. This is why you sometimes see a child who seems wise beyond their years, or who displays talents or interests that mystify their parents. They're carrying forward abilities and knowledge from previous incarnations. That's a profound shift in how we understand family dynamics, the researcher mused. Indeed, Cayce nodded. When parents recognize that their children are not possessions but sovereign souls with whom they've made sacred agreements, it transforms their approach to parenting. Similarly, when children, especially as they mature, understand that they chose their parents for specific soul lessons, it can heal much resentment and misunderstanding. The researcher hesitated before asking his next question. What about connections that end? Relationships that terminate through death or separation? Cayce's expression grew contemplative. No meaningful soul connection truly ends. It only changes form. When a relationship concludes in this physical life, whether through death, divorce, or circumstance, the soul connection remains intact on a spiritual level. The lessons continue, the growth continues, the love, if it was genuine, continues. Physical separation cannot sever what exists in the spiritual realm. Is that why people sometimes feel the presence of loved ones who have passed? The researcher asked quietly. Precisely, Cayce confirmed. The soul's connection transcends physical death. He might not be physically present, but his spirit feels you, loves you, continues to participate in your journey, albeit in a different form. This is not wishful thinking, but spiritual reality. The researcher sat back, visibly processing the magnitude of these concepts. After a moment, he leaned forward again. These ideas would revolutionize how we understand human connection, if widely accepted. Why do you think modern society has lost touch with the Cayce sighed deep? The materialist paradigm that dominates your era has trained people to trust only what they can see and. But the most powerful forces in existence, love, consciousness, spiritual connection, are invisible to your instruments. As your civilization has advanced technologically, it has simultaneously regressed in its understanding of spiritual principles. You've gained knowledge but lost wisdom. Yet people still experience these connections, the researcher pointed out. They still feel these inexplicable bonds. Because the soul's wisdom cannot be entirely suppressed, Cayce smiled. No matter how much your society dismisses spiritual realities, the soul continues its journey, continues to recognize its kindred spirits. This is why even the most skeptical person can be undone by an unexpected soul recognition. That moment when they meet someone and something within them awakens, remembers. The researcher pondered this for a moment. You've mentioned the Akashic records several times. Could you elaborate on what these are and how they relate to soul connections? The Akashic records, Cayce began, settling more comfortably in his chair, can be understood as the universe's memory system, a vibrational record of every soul's journey, every thought, word, and action across all lifetimes. When souls connect in meaningful ways, those connections are imprinted in the Akashic records. When you encounter that soul again, your spirit accesses this record, triggering recognition. Can anyone access these records? The researcher asked, fascination evident in his voice. Everyone accesses them during sleep and deep meditation, though few remember doing so, Cayce explained. In dreams, you often process information from the Akashic records, including insights about your soul connections. This is why you might dream about someone you're about to meet, or gain clarity about a relationship through dream symbolism. Your soul is communicating what it knows from accessing these records. This explains so much about human behavior that psychology struggles to address, the researcher murmured, almost to himself. Looking up, he asked, what about collective soul connections? Groups of people who seem drawn together for a purpose. Soul groups, Cayce nodded. Yes, souls often incarnate in clusters to work on collective purposes or to support each other through challenging times. This explains why certain groups, whether creative collaborators, social movements, or spiritual communities, come together with a sense of shared mission that transcends individual interests. Their spirits recognize the shared contract, the collective purpose. The researchers' questions continued, each answer from Cayce revealing new layers of understanding about the spiritual nature of human connections. As their conversation deepened, the simple room in Virginia Beach seemed to expand, as if the walls themselves were responding to the profound truths being articulated. Mr. Cayce, the researcher said finally, after nearly 2 hours of conversation, you've painted a picture of human relationships that is far more meaningful, far more purposeful than what modern psychology or sociology suggests. But I must ask, if these connections are so important, why aren't we consciously aware of them? Why does the spirit know what the mind does not? Cayce was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. The veil of forgetting serves a purpose, he said at last. If you remembered everything, all your past connections, all your soul agreements, you might approach relationships with preconceptions that would interfere with the authentic unfolding of lessons in this lifetime. The forgetting allows for fresh choices, new perspectives. The spirit knows, but allows the mind to discover gradually as needed for your growth. A final question, if I may, the researcher said, closing his notebook. For those who recognize these soul connections in their lives, who feel that inexplicable resonance with certain people, what wisdom would you offer? How should they honor these connections? Edgar Cayce's eyes seemed to look beyond the researcher, as if addressing all who would eventually hear his words. Honor each significant connection as sacred, whether it brings joy or challenge. Recognize that you've been brought together for mutual growth and learning. Listen to what your spirit feels, even when your mind doesn't understand. And perhaps most importantly, understand that love, true soul-level love, is never wasted or lost. It continues beyond this physical existence, binding souls together across eternity. As the sun began to set outside the window, casting long shadows across the room, the researcher thanked Cayce for his insights. What had begun as an intellectual inquiry had transformed into something far more personal, a profound reconsideration of every significant relationship in his own life. The wisdom shared that day in Virginia Beach would remain largely hidden from the world for decades, mentioned only in passing references in Cayce's documented readings. Yet its truth resonates through time, offering a profound perspective on why certain people enter our lives and leave indelible marks on our souls. Why he might not know why, but his spirit feels you. The eternal nature of soul connections transcends our limited understanding of time and space. Edgar Cayce's insights reveal that what appears as separate, you and me, us and them, is an illusion created by physical existence. At the level of spirit, we exist in a state of profound interconnectedness, our individual journeys woven together in a tapestry of mutual growth and evolution. This understanding transforms how we perceive even the most challenging relationships in our lives. The difficult parent, the betraying partner, the estranged friend. These souls aren't random sources of pain, but specific teachers who agreed to play these roles for our spiritual development. Likewise, those who support, love, and uplift us aren't merely fortunate encounters, but soul companions continuing a journey of mutual support across multiple lifetimes. Cayce's perspective invites us to approach each significant relationship with reverence and curiosity. What is this connection teaching me? Why has this soul appeared in my life at this moment? What ancient promise or unresolved pattern are we addressing together? When we frame our relationships within this spiritual context, even conflict becomes meaningful, not something to merely endure, but something to explore for its deeper purpose. The profound implication of Cayce's teaching is that love is never truly lost. Relationships that appear to end through death, separation, or circumstance continue on a soul level. The connections remain, the love persists, even when physical proximity is no longer possible. This understanding offers profound comfort to those grieving lost relationships, suggesting that the bond endures beyond physical separation. Perhaps most revolutionary is Cayce's assertion that these connections operate regardless of conscious awareness. Your spirit recognizes kindred souls even when your mind cannot comprehend why. This explains the mysterious attraction, the inexplicable knowing, the sense of familiarity with certain strangers. Your soul is remembering what your conscious mind has forgotten. In a world increasingly dominated by transactional relationships and superficial connections, Cayce's perspective offers a radical alternative, a vision of human relationships as sacred contracts between immortal souls, each serving the other's evolution across the grand arc of existence. This isn't merely a comforting spiritual notion, but a practical framework for understanding why certain people impact us so profoundly, why some connections defy logical explanation, why certain relationships catalyze our greatest growth. The recognition that soul connections transcend physical reality doesn't diminish the importance of our earthly relationships. Rather, it imbues them with greater significance. Each interaction becomes an opportunity for soul recognition, for healing ancient wounds, for fulfilling spiritual promises made before birth. This awareness transforms ordinary encounters into sacred moments of connection. As we awaken to the spiritual dimension of our relationships, we begin to recognize the invisible threads that have always connected us to certain others. Threads that extend beyond this lifetime into realms we can sense, but not fully comprehend while in physical form. We understand that the feeling of, "I've known you before," isn't imagination, but soul recognition. The spirit, acknowledging a beloved companion from its eternal journey. Edgar Cayce's profound insight, he might not know why, but his spirit feels you, encapsulates a truth that resonates across time and culture. It speaks to the mystery of human connection that transcends rational explanation, the soul's capacity to recognize its own, even when the mind cannot comprehend the recognition. It offers a framework for understanding the inexplicable bonds that define our most significant relationships. In embracing this perspective, we open ourselves to a richer, more meaningful experience of human connection. We begin to perceive the sacred choreography that has brought certain souls into our lives at specific moments. We recognize that what appears as chance is actually purpose. What seems random is actually designed. What feels unfamiliar may actually be the most familiar connection of all. A soul with whom we've danced across eternity, continuing a conversation that began long ago and will continue long after these physical forms have returned to dust. This is the transformative truth that Edgar Cayce accessed in his remarkable trance states. The truth that our connections exist beyond time, beyond space, beyond physical reality. The truth that even when consciously forgotten, the soul remembers. The truth that he might not know why, but his spirit feels you, always has, always will, across the infinite expanse of existence. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Edgar Cayce's profound insights into the spiritual nature of human connection. If these ideas resonated with you, if you've experienced those inexplicable moments of soul recognition in your own life, we'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Every experience you share helps others recognize the spiritual dimensions of their own relationships. Your engagement with this content helps us reach more people who are seeking deeper understanding of their most meaningful connections. If you found value in these insights, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more explorations of spiritual wisdom from history's greatest visionaries. Remember, in every significant connection in your life, there is purpose beyond what the conscious mind can comprehend. Trust what your spirit feels. It knows what your mind has yet to remember.